Welcome to this emergency ZKast, everyone, as well as joint Analyst Angle. I'm here with Christophe Bertrand from theCube Research. Christophe, how you been?
Been good. Good to see you again. I mean, so much going on, and we're just a few weeks after RSA, and it feels like
Yeah,
it
and
doesn't
Black Hat's
stop.
coming up, but we had some big news this morning. Palo Alto announced its intent to acquire CyberArk for a big number, 25 billion. That's about a 26% premium to the 10-day moving average for CyberArk under the terms of the agreement. Shareholders will get about 45 bucks in cash, as well as 2.2 Palo Alto shares per CyberArk share. It's a big nut to swallow here. If the stock's actually down a little bit on the news, I actually don't think it's really all that big a price. And frankly, I've always thought if an acquisition is a good one, you really can't pay too much. You just make sure you get the deal done. And if an acquisition is a bad one, though, you can't pay too little, right? So we've seen lots of acquisitions go sideways. Initial thoughts on the deal?
So, a few things. First of all, I'm not surprised that we're seeing this level of acquisition consolidation going on in the market. And I really want to refer back to the NIST model, which is really influencing a lot of the end users out there. And they actually understand it. We have just conducted research here at the Cube Research that shows that essentially 85% of the people around the world actually understand NIST, whether in IT or in a cyber type of job functions. So it's a common language. And what it does too, it sort of breaks down what I would call cyber resiliency into these kind of neat practices that have to work together. And guess what? Not everybody does everything today. But you start looking at the market, and I kind of come from more the infrastructure, the backup recovery. So think of the protect and recovery and response
Yeah.
sort of world from a NIST standpoint, and to a little extent governance in the NIST.2 parlance. And what I'm seeing is, well, a lot of these vendors are starting to acquire as well in other parts of NIST. And here, what we're seeing is really consolidation that's really trying to respond to a broader spectrum of solutions or a solution that is expanding to do more functionally. And I expect that's going to continue, and we're going to see more acquisitions inspired by this sort of functional race. It's an arms race, and I think it's probably going to be a size race as well, in terms of not just functionality, but business size.
Yeah, I wasn't, so obviously a Palo Alto making an acquisition isn't a surprise because they do this all the time. Um, should we be surprised they're moving into identity space? I'll recall back to a conversation with Nikesh at RSA in the roundtable, and we were talking about agentic AI and the importance of identity. And he did call it out as an area that they were weak in. In fact, he used a pretty interesting example. He just said, take an easy agentic AI use case that we talk about with consumers, and it's just rebook my flight, right? And it's like, but think about the derivative effects of that. Rebooking my flight also requires you to rebook your hotel, your car, restaurant reservations, and things like that. And so he talked a lot about who owns the credentials for that. Do you give, United access to all your other information or vice versa? Do you have an Uber agent that does all that? And on CNBC this morning, he actually mentioned that a data point with 88% of ransomware attacks being driven by credential threat, we have to start giving credentials to these autonomous agents. And so you can see that we're heading down this path where, I mean, without the proper security, we could be setting ourselves up for a lot of, identity theft. And so I think this to me is a logical extension of the Palo Alto platform. And it's something, like I said, they hadn't had before.
I agree. And the other thing, you're bringing up AI, agentic AI. I think in order to do AI, you need a few things done right, right? So if you think about it, it's about trusting the data and trusting the AI, right? And in order to trust the data, there are a bunch of things you need to do. But one of them for sure is access to said data. And when you start letting agents kind of run loose, I mean, who knows, right? What could happen? So it's intertwined, and I don't think you can expect organizations to deploy AI at scale without having built that cyber resiliency and that level of trust in the data, and then in the AI itself, which is where the agentic component comes into play, and the
Yeah.
access, privilege access management, all of that good stuff. And the truth
Yeah.
is, I mean, if you think about what's going on in the market today, a lot of incidents today actually go totally ignored, which is fascinating to me. And that's one of the other issues that's sort of fueling, I think, a lot of these additions to the feature set.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the concept of privilege because in security we talk a lot about the proliferation of privilege, but it's not just users today, right? So we talked about agentic agents, but there's also IoT devices. In fact, last week NVIDIA did an industry analyst briefing on physical AI, right? So we're going to start seeing more autonomous devices in different environments. In fact, I talked to a CISO from a hospital, and he's really looking forward to the day that they have things like autonomous wheelchairs, because instead of having a clinician wheel the patient out, the wheelchair can do it. But then you have to, again, start thinking about the privilege access that that type of device has. And so I'm glad you brought the term, because privilege certainly is being proliferated everywhere in a company. Agreed?
Oh, absolutely. And that is going to become, again, all the more relevant as you think about
Yeah.
agents, you think about, yeah, you're right, all of these devices. But the question I really have is, where are we today? And is this even a battle that can be won, given how much data there is, how many devices there are? We're not even covering here some of the very interesting networking components. I know it's something you talk with Bob Liberty about quite a bit on a regular basis. So it really takes, you think about this, it really takes an ecosystem today to bring
Yeah.
a solution together to be able to enable this sort of beautifully automated AI thing. Let's take it step by step. As I said, I think you break down NIST into its various components and think about the governance you need to add on top of it. And you realize that the feature set that's needed is extremely wide. So I think this acquisition is just a precursor to, first of all, probably many more in the industry. But I also think that some vendors in industries that were not connected with security, except as a software developer, you have to secure your environment and your solution. I'm thinking backup and recovery vendors. Traditional
Yeah.
backup recovery vendors have become now well positioned in cyber resiliency, and I think I could see them making more acquisitions or becoming the target of acquisitions from really call it left side or right side. I don't even know which side to look at.
Yeah, so that's a fascinating point you bring up, because I look at companies like Veeam and Commvault and that are traditional backup and recovery companies that show up now at RSA, at Black Hat, because they do play a role not in ransomware protection, but in the logical next step, which is ransomware recovery. And you could argue that they should be rolled up into a cyber portfolio, or perhaps, in the case of Veeam, that's flush with cash right now, maybe they should start doing some cyber acquisitions, right? And that's an interesting thing to think about. It's like the dotted line between security and backup and recovery isn't so dotted anymore. It's directly there.
Right.
And
Well, I think
I'm not sure how that plays out. Nikesh actually said another interesting thing on Kramer this morning, just talking about, and this I think supports your thesis, that if you play in cyber and you're under $1 billion, you really shouldn't. You should become part of a bigger company's platform, because we are driving towards platformization, and I know that's a trend you've been following. So maybe some thoughts on that too.
Yeah, it's very obvious that first of all, it's teamwork. When you're just talking about ransomware, any type of cyber incident, you realize you have to bring a lot of different technologies and people and skill sets into play. If you look at the total addressable market of all of those components, it's a ridiculous number, and that's exactly why the 1 billion mark, which is probably too low actually, makes sense. I mean, of course, you need startups, etc. But remember, products become features. And now what we're seeing is the next level up. Companies become components of platforms. And that's exactly what we just saw here. And it's at 25 billion. That was it. It's a nice piece,
Yeah,
nice amount.
it's a
But
nice
it's not
exit, that's for
nothing.
sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of
Yeah,
coin.
and actually, you're right. Products do become features, and if you follow security, you'll have seen this. So if you think about the next gen firewall, which was, you could argue, the first ever platform, security platform, Most of the things in a next-gen firewall, VPN, IPS, firewall capability, all those were standalone products at one time, and then they got rolled up, and now they're fairly standardized, right? If you look at the SSE stack, same thing, right? CASB, SWIG, things like that, Zero Trust, those are all standalone products. Now they're rolled up into part of a broader cloud security platform. You could argue, I think, that identity perhaps will become the SOC tools consolidating, right, into a platform, and identity, maybe becomes that next platform. Yeah.
It could be. It's one angle. As I said, I think it's an arms race right now. It feels like that a little bit. We'll see which way it goes. I could see maybe a couple of components, again, going back to NIST, a couple of areas becoming maybe more prevalent in terms of where you consolidate. And very much like we've seen in other spaces, like in cloud or in data platforms, there will be some philosophies that emerge. Do we need to come from this side or that side? What's the right level of consolidation, governance, management? Arguably, the backup and recovery space is one that's very interesting to become that place, potentially. But there are others. The other point also that's important to remember is that it's early days for AI too, and what we're seeing is that you cannot redo AI without another piece, which we haven't even talked about, which is governance and compliance, and that's also driving a lot of the cyber resiliency features because you have to comply. So you get actually a third wheel here in a sense, which is governance and compliance. And in my research, I've seen that become more and more important. And you need that also for AI. So to an extent, this helps as well. But I would not discount a push from certain vendors that we're not even thinking about coming again from that sort of left side of data management and governance, which was so boring a few years ago, but has become very essential, especially as we see more and more agentic AI, and you're going to have to prove what you've been doing or what your agents have been doing.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? So anyway, I don't want to go too broadly here on this topic. We're talking about a very specific acquisition today. But I think all of this has to be something that is being thought about by the leaders here who are really looking at the big prize, which is I want to become the technology, the platform you leverage, not just for cyber resiliency, but for AI. That's really what's at play here. Let's not kid
Right. Yeah.
ourselves.
And this is all leading us back to AI. So, anyways, in summary, I think both of us pretty positive on the acquisition. Identity, if that is the next area to fall, I think Okta's on the clock, right? See maybe who, although they've had a few breaches themselves, but certainly they become in play for another platform vendor. Any final thoughts, Christophe?
Well, there's only one thing we know. There will only be more data. There will be more acquisitions. That's the only prediction on the future that we
Yeah.
can make. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't be shocked if we talked again in the next few weeks.
Yeah, no, it's interesting things to think about. Where else, because of AI, does the security platform extend into? And I think your point on backup recovery is a good one. So, on behalf of Christophe Bertrand from theCUBE Research, I'm Zeus Caravallo from ZK Research. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this combined Analyst Angle and Emergency ZKast. So until next time, give us a like and hit that subscribe button.